What's up, RotoBallers? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorden Hill, and today we're going to be taking a look at the players that haven't lived up to the hype for fantasy purposes through 2 weeks of the NFL season, and talk about whether or not it's time to move on from them altogether, or maybe just bench them until further notice. Diving right in, 2022's rushing leader Josh Jacobs hasn't been what you drafted him to be 2 weeks into the season, and he was especially disappointing here in week 2 when he managed just -2 rushing yards on 9 carries. Now, he did manage to salvage his day a little bit with some production through the passing game, but still, he was far from the top 10 fantasy back that you expected. One important thing to note is that Las Vegas has played 2 pretty good defenses to open the season, as they face the Broncos and the Bills, both in away matchups. With that being said, the Raiders' schedule opens up a little bit over the next 2 weeks when they'll take on the Steelers and then the Chargers, so I'm still confident rolling out Jacobs. I mean, his opportunity's not going anywhere, and I think you can continue to lock him in as a top 15 or so option. A running back I'm a bit more concerned with is Damien Pierce. He doesn't seem to have the workhorse role that many expected, as he logged just 45% of the team's offensive snaps in week 2, and the Texans got Devin Singletary and Dare Agumbawale involved as well. On top of that, game script typically isn't going to be in Pierce's favor, as the Texans' defense has allowed 28 points per game over the first 2 weeks, and rookie quarterback CJ Stroud has been forced to sling it. If you drafted Pierce, you gotta hang on and just hope that Houston establishes some sort of identity on the ground eventually. But I'm going to avoid starting Pierce in fantasy lineups if I can until we see that happen. He may not have played in week 2, but we have to sound the alarms on Cam Akers, who was announced as a healthy scratch early on Sunday. I mentioned Akers last week when he had a really inefficient season opener, and Kyren Williams seems to have a strong hold of the RB1 duties now in LA. The Rams are reportedly shopping Akers, which makes this an eerily similar situation to what we had last season. They tried to trade him, they couldn't find a trade partner, and then eventually Akers became a fantasy league winner over the second half of the season. This year, I don't expect Akers fantasy managers to get so lucky. Even if he does get traded, I think it's unlikely that he finds a starting job on another team. If you have an adequate amount of bench spots and you want to hang on to Akers, then go for it, but personally, I would feel totally comfortable cutting him after this week. Moving over to the wide receiver position, let's get this one out of the way quickly. A.J. Brown has had a disappointing start to the 2023 campaign, as Devonta Smith has been the most productive pass catcher in Philadelphia. There's no need to panic, everything's going to be just fine. We saw Brown get frustrated on the sidelines on Thursday night, and immediately afterwards, Jalen Hurts started peppering him with targets. Now, this didn't translate to a ton of fantasy production, but I expect that to change in week 3. You gotta keep Brown locked in as a top option in fantasy going forward. On a different note, Chargers rookie receiver Quentin Johnston only has 5 targets through his first 2 games, and he's still clearly behind Joshua Palmer on the depth chart. Now, we've seen in the past that highly drafted receivers can take up to half a season or so to get going, but even if Johnston gets more involved as the season progresses, I think he'll at least still be behind Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler in the team's pecking order. If an injury were to occur to any of LA's top 3 wideouts, Johnston could become an interesting option, but I think it's pretty safe to drop him for the time being. At tight end, here we are again, panicking about Kyle Pitts. The former 4th overall pick has just 4 catches through his first 2 games, and he was severely outproduced by Jonnu Smith in week 2. The unfortunate truth is just that Pitts is unlikely to be featured in this offense led by Arthur Smith, and that's going to make it really difficult for him to return fantasy value based on where you drafted him. I definitely don't recommend dropping Pitts, and obviously you can't sell him high right now, but still, I would be trying to trade him based on talent and name value. There are tight ends that you could have got off the waiver wire, such as Hunter Henry, that I would much rather start moving forward. In summary, I'm really not worried about Josh Jacobs or A.J. Brown. These are supremely talented players that I expect to bounce back sooner rather than later. With Damien Pierce, however, his usage has been pretty concerning through the first 2 weeks of the season, and I don't think that fantasy managers or the Texans will be able to rely on him if Houston's defense continues to surrender so many points. We don't know what the future holds for Cam Akers, but in most formats, you probably can't afford to hold on to him and wait for a better opportunity. And same goes for Quentin Johnston, who finds himself buried on the Chargers depth chart and hasn't seen a lot of playing time through the first 2 games of his NFL career. Finally, Kyle Pitts has his fantasy managers panicked once again, and I really can't blame them. I would prefer to keep Pitts out of my starting lineup unless we see a change in his utilization at some point, and I would definitely be trying to trade him if I can get anything useful in return. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment down below with the players that have you concerned 2 weeks into the NFL season. Please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to RotoBaller for more fantasy football analysis that'll help you win big in 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in, and best of luck in Week 3.